Let my dad go, and I'll make you walk. The Atlanta District Courtroom had never known silence like this. A moment earlier, it was business as usual, stern faces, legal arguments, and the gavel striking once with authority. All rise, the bailiff announced. Everyone stood as Judge Elias Monroe rolled into the courtroom, his black robe cascading over the sides of his wheelchair. 62 years old, paralyzed from the waist down, and yet his steel blue eyes still commanded the room. 10 years in that chair hadn't softened him. If anything, he'd grown sharper. Known for handing out the harshest sentences, especially to men like the one sitting silently at the defendant's table today. Malik Thomas, late 30s, a black man in a faded peach prison jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front, charged with obstruction, fraud, and resisting arrest. To the court, he was just another case, another number. To Judge Monroe, he was a repeat offender with no remorse. This was open and shut. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the people recommend no less than 15 years. The defendant has wasted this court's time with outrageous claims of false imprisonment. He lied about who he is and what he can do. It's time he faced the consequences. Malik lowered his head. His public defender didn't say a word. She'd stopped fighting hours ago. Judge Monroe straightened in his chair, ready to speak. But before he could, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Small footsteps echoed across the chamber. Gasps followed. A little girl, no more than 7, walked in. She wore a light blue dress. Her hair was neatly braided into 2 long plaits. She was alone. No adult in sight. No one stopped her. She walked right down the center aisle, past shocked spectators, past murmuring lawyers, and stunned bailiffs, until she stood directly in front of the judge's bench. "Who is this child?" Judge Monroe barked, clearly caught off guard. Before anyone could respond, she looked up at him, calm, unblinking. And then she said, "Let my daddy go, and I'll make you walk." Laughter erupted from the gallery. Someone snorted at the prosecution's table. Even one of the guards smirked. Judge Monroe blinked. "What did you just say?" "I said, if you let him go, I'll make you walk." "This is a courtroom, not a place for fairy tales," he replied sternly. "Bailiff, remove the girl." "Please!" Malik suddenly cried out, half standing. "Just let her speak." "Sit down," Monroe snapped. "This is highly irregular." The girl didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the judge. "I came because you're not listening," she said softly. "Nobody listens to my dad. Nobody knows who he really is." Judge Monroe narrowed his eyes. "And who is he?" "He used to help people," she answered. "He used to make them better." The courtroom chuckled again. Even the stenographer had to look down to hide her smile. Monroe turned to his clerk, annoyed. "Why is she even allowed in here?" "She's his daughter," the bailiff admitted quietly. "She walked in alone, refused to leave. We didn't know what to do." "You should have stopped her at the door." "We tried." The judge looked back at the girl. "What's your name, child?" "Amara," she said. Silence fell again, a name that felt heavier than it should have. "Amara," the judge said carefully, "I don't know what you think is going to happen here, but this is a courtroom, not a place for whatever this is." "But this is exactly where it needs to happen," she replied. "You've been in that chair for 10 years, haven't you?" Monroe stiffened. "You couldn't feel your legs after the accident. They said your spine was broken, that you'd never walk again." His lips thinned. "That's not your concern." "But you want to walk." Monroe gripped the wheels of his chair tightly. Amara stepped forward. The bailiffs shifted. "I'm not here to scare you," she said gently, "but I'm asking you something no one else will. Please don't hurt my dad again. He didn't lie. You just didn't believe him." The judge's eyes flicked toward Malik, whose face trembled with emotion. Amara slowly lifted her hand, as if reaching for something invisible. "If you give him back to me, she whispered. "I'll give something back to you." Monroe opened his mouth, but stopped, because for the first time in a decade, he felt something, not pain, not illusion, just warmth, like sunlight on skin long forgotten. It started at his knees. It wasn't movement, but it was real. He looked down. Still nothing moved, but something inside had changed. Amara raised her hand higher. "Please," she said again, "let him go." Malik was shaking now, tears welling in his eyes. "She's not lying," he whispered. Judge Monroe stared at the child. For the first time in his career, he had no words. The courtroom held its breath. That small hand was still reaching toward him, unshaken, steady. The warmth in his legs hadn't faded. It was growing, moving upward like a quiet flame, awakening long-dead nerves. He slowly released the rims of his chair. "What are you doing to me?" "I'm not doing anything," Amara answered softly. "You've always wanted to walk. I'm just unlocking what's still inside you." "You're a child." She nodded. "And you're afraid." His jaw clenched. "You think I'm scared of fairy tales?" "No," she said simply. "You're scared of being wrong." Those words struck deeper than he expected, because they were true. He hadn't just lost movement in his legs. He'd lost belief. In people, in change, in anything he couldn't control. He had built his identity around that chair and locked the world out. He looked again at Malik. The man wasn't surprised, only in awe. "You knew she could do this," Monroe said. Malik swallowed. "She's done things before, little things. I never asked her to. I never let her try this. But I told her I wasn't getting out, that I'd be gone a long time," she said. "Not if I help." The warmth reached his thighs. He looked down again. Then, impossibly, he moved his right foot. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, screams, scraping chairs. But Amara didn't move. Then, his left foot shifted. Slowly, Monroe pressed his hands to the arms of his chair and stood, on both feet. Silence crashed over the room like thunder. The prosecutor's mouth dropped open. The bailiff took a step back. Judge Elias Monroe stood tall. His legs shook, but they held. He tried to speak, but emotion choked his voice. Amara smiled. "Now, please give me back my dad." He collapsed back into his seat, not in failure, but in awe. This is impossible." No one laughed now. His clerk leaned in. "Sir, what do we do now?" The judge looked at the file. Malik's record. So many arrests, most dismissed. One charge, no conviction. And this one, based on an anonymous tip. No physical evidence, no victim. It had never felt right. He just hadn't cared enough to question it. "Bring me the arresting officer's report," he ordered. Documents shuffled, files opened, and then it all began to unravel. Gaps in the timeline, missing evidence, witness lies. Within the hour, Judge Monroe gave his final ruling. "Mr. Malik Thomas," he said, voice shaking as he stood again, "you are hereby cleared of all charges. Your record will be expunged, and this court owes you an apology." Amara ran into her father's arms. Still cuffed, Malik dropped to his knees and held her close. "She did what she promised," he whispered. Monroe stepped closer. "I want to know how she did that." Malik stood, looked him in the eyes. "She didn't heal you. She reminded you that you could heal yourself." Monroe shook his head. "That doesn't make sense." "It's not supposed to." Then, for the first time in years, Judge Monroe smiled. "You're free, Mr. Thomas. Bailiff, remove his chains." The shackles hit the floor. Malik lifted Amara into his arms, tears running down both their faces. As they turned to leave, the judge called out one last time, "Amara?" She stopped, looked back. "Thank you." She smiled. "Now maybe you can believe."